Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one that is post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. It's Monday and Edwin is with me. Hi Edwin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Martin, other than the fact that it's an ugly day today. Very, very ugly. Had to travel into the city, had to get on use the ugly public transport. And next thing you know, I find out that the government's put out some more reassurance of this ugly housing policies. And then around the corner, I get told that it's Ugly Dog Day, Martin.
Yes, Ugly Dog Day. Yeah, you sent me some notes, and there were a couple of quite scary photographs. We'll put them up on the screen, right? But it's a thing, isn't it? Ugly Dog Day. It's a thing.
It is. It's a thing. But you know what, Martin? You can love these puppies, and they love you back. I've got nothing against dogs or ugly dogs for that matter. But what I was thinking, we continue this with the themes of what day it is, and I reckon next Monday we should make it Ugly Real Estate Agent Selling Real Estate Agent Day. What do you reckon? And we get our viewers to send us photos of the local real estate agents.
Okay, well, be careful you don't get sued.
Oh well, now they paste them. They paste their melons on the selling boards on the signboards in front of homes. So hey, fair game.
Oh, okay, right. So, folks, what we want you to do is to, when you see a signboard with a photograph of an agent on it, take a photograph and send it to us. And
exactly. And then we'll just put it up and see which one's the ugliest.
Edwin will judge. Yeah, it is amazing, actually, isn't it? How they try and make themselves, so very much sort of the centre of the action. Been around for years. You can trust me, etc., right? And the more they say it, the less I believe it.
And you know what, Martin? The VPA or vendor paid advertising that the poor bastards that get conned into paying the agents to sell their homes. 2/3 of it goes to promoting the agent and the office, and 1/3, I'd say, if that goes to actually promoting the home, which is rather, it's another story for another day. But I've written a lot about that and how the vendor paid advertising is a scam, and because of the vendor paid advertising scams that have been going on now for over a decade, hence the reason why Domain and REA charge a fortune to real estate agents to place ads for homes and for sale and for rent. And we've created these two beasts that now, as I've said before in many of our podcasts, they're gonna swallow the industry, and they're gonna swallow it very soon.
Yeah, well, you notice that REA acquired an interest in the PEXA, right, which is the a registry firm, and they've acquired a couple of other interests in other organisations too. So they're basically building out their portfolio of businesses to be able to control the whole value chain.
Well, that's correct. And look, for what it's worth, the Nerida Ken Nibsby, your mate, has formed an alliance with Ray White. I believe she's also the economist, the head economist now for Ray White. So it's sort of, for me, it starts. These are signs that the REA is moving closer towards setting up their own real estate agency. As I said before, Martin, I've been saying for a number of years, and I've shared with you over 18 months ago, with regards to the both Domain and REA. The annual revenue for advertising is $2.4 to $2.5 billion per annum across Australia, and I'm not sure whether that includes New Zealand. But whereas the commission revenue across Australia is $15 billion. So they're saying, well, vendors or buyers come to our websites to look for property, and agents put and vendors place the ads on our websites to for people to come and view. So they're saying, well, how come? What are selling agents really doing in order to provide? Why is their service worth $15 billion and ours is only worth 2.5? So unfortunately, they forget the fact that we helped build these beasts, and now these are going to swallow us. And you only have to look at the signs of big tech big tech, big pharma, big industry, swallowing up the small players. And I said 5 years ago that 4 or 5 years ago that within 5 years we were going to be swallowed up, and I really believe they were a lot closer.
Well, the old empire strikes back, right? So basically they get larger, they get more controlling, they suck more of the value out of the value chain, and that leads less for everybody else. The analogy with the supermarket sector is, I think, quite relevant here.
Look, very much so, and this is why a lot of the SMEs are going broke. They're either going broke or they're diminishing in size, which basically means diminishing in revenue, in incomes, which means less money going into the owners and less money to employ people. So it's a vicious circle. This whole pandemic has just turned the whole world upside down, and that's why you got to start asking yourself the question: was it premeditated? Did it just happen? Was it orchestrated? Who's behind it? But look, and if it wasn't, then really what we're seeing is just things speeding up to the inevitable, and that is that the bigger you are, the easier it is to swallow the small players. And unfortunately, here in Australia, our economy is largely made up of SMEs that are many of these industries, many of these poor bastards that have got businesses out there are just going to be swallowed up and just going to be fade away into the ethos.
Absolutely. No, it is a very concerning trend, but of course it's a trend not just here but around the world. And talking of trends around the world, Ronaldo made an interesting stand, didn't he?
Well, it's an ugly world, Martin. It's an ugly world, and in order for I'm going to follow suit, Martin. I got my water, drinking water. I'm slowly cutting back on. I don't drink Coke, but whatever it is that I drink. But I'm going to take his advice, and I don't want to become an ugly real estate agent, and get my snapshot given to us so it can be part of the competition.
Fair enough. No, it is very interesting. Now, let's talk about the ugly government policy in a bit more detail. Right? I made a post on this earlier today because I was pretty disgusted when I saw Michael Sukkar coming out yet again and basically extending the first home owner bribes to try and get more people in to buy properties at the top of the market so that the banks can continue to lend.
Yeah, and this is why I say to a lot of people, and I like to get back down to numbers. I like to bring things back down to numbers, and numbers paint a real interesting picture. If you look at the average, which we spoke about last week, with regards to the median house price in Sydney being 1.3 or thereabouts, and the average price being not far below that at 120 or something like that. So if we took the average price for a dwelling in Sydney at $1,100,000, so that would mean that the 15% that the government's going to lend people to go out and buy a property is close to $170,000. That's a second mortgage that has to be paid off. And obviously we need to read the fine print as to how all that's going to evolve. The big question is, if you've only got 5% equity in a transaction, in a property purchase, there's a big risk that if the market does turn, I'm not saying it will or when it will, but I'm asking the question, if it turns, how long before the banks jump in and start trying to claw their position, and who's going to have first call? Who's going to have first preference as to the equity that's left in the property? They're real questions. Now, some would say, "Oh, yeah, that's farcical. You can't work it out on the mean. It's work it out on the average in Sydney because it's too high. Work it out across Australia. So the average across Australia is $750 to $800. So that's still $120,000 loan that you're going to receive from the bank." The ugliness of this, Martin, as I've been saying for decades, is that government policies to gift people money, because this is all this is. The real and when you look at the transparency or when you look at this in reality, it's a loan which could be seen as a gift in a way, that, or money up front is a better term, or better analogy. And if it's money up front, all that's happened now is that come 1st of July, developers and builders of new homes will just increase their prices by anywhere between 5 and 10%. Off the bat, because they know that the government's going to stump up the upfront cash so that the purchasers can get the 80% loans.
Well, I have a feeling the way it's going to work, and I could be wrong on this, is that the banks will lend the full amount. Let's take the 5% deposit, right? So the banks basically will be looking for a 5% deposit. They will lend up to 95% against that deposit, right? Knowing that the difference between the 95 and the 80 is covered by a government guarantee effectively, right? So what that means is that, of course, the borrower still has to actually repay interest and principal on the 95%, right? But the bank is protected. So if there's a drop in price by 15%, right, the bank is still protected, so their security is still intact, because they can always call on the government if they need to basically make up the difference if things went wrong, right? That's the way it works. So this is completely designed to protect the banks and to allow them to lend more, right? I agree with you also, it's going to probably have an upward influence on terms of overall prices, because it means that people potentially can borrow more because they need a smaller deposit. The other point is that you've got to be very careful, because if you actually have a 5% deposit, there's no guarantee that the rate of interest you're going to get on that loan is as competitive as it would have been if you got a larger deposit, right? Now, the government initially said that they would try and ensure that there was no differentiation in the interest rates between the 5% and the 20% rates, right? But in fact, some of the research that I've done and some of the feedback I've had from individuals who've gone through this process suggests they're finding it quite difficult to get a loan with an interest rate the same. They're having to pay more. So let's just stand back and think about it. 5% means you can get into the market, but you have to pay principal and interest repayments on the 95%. So you have bigger repayments. Secondly, the chances are your interest rate will be higher, so you're paying a bigger amount. And thirdly, if anything goes wrong, 15% essentially protects the bank, but it protects the bank, it doesn't protect the borrower. The borrower still is up for the gap, right? So that's the problem. So my view is this is just smoke and mirrors. It's all about protecting the banks and protecting the property and construction sector, because of course they're also allowing people to get loans to buy new properties as well. People need to understand this and read the small print and go very carefully, because this is not the simple help you into the market story that of course the government keeps spinning. That's just rubbish.
Well, that's great. And now you've got to also be careful as a buyer. You've got to be careful as to what class or what type of property you buy. If you get conned into buying an apartment, or even if you bought a townhouse, or even if you bought a villa, or is it a freestanding home? You definitely, I don't believe that that this is going to encourage you to buy established dwellings. Because my take on this, and I could be wrong, is that it's really to promote as you said, the construction industry, and and is it their way of trying to protect the carnage that's about to come with the falling prices with apartments. So time is going to as things are clarified and as things are made more clear to the general public, we'll figure out where that goes. But definitely one thing for sure is that buyers are going to have to be very careful where they buy and what type of property they buy.
No, that's a very good point, Edwin, and it's worth reflecting. Although they have lifted the ceiling in terms of the value, this time around, those are still quite low top level values in most areas, particularly for the 95% loans. You wouldn't probably be able to buy a standalone house. It would predominantly be apartments, right? So my theory has always been that this is a way of trying to essentially shift some of the surplus apartments that are all over the place. I mean, the vacancy rates and the ones that are actually just not on the market yet, but should be on the market, is astonishing in some areas. So again, I think that you've got to look through this and understand this is about helping the construction sector. This is about helping the construction sector to try and shift some of the apartments they've not been able to sell. And as you say, the value of those apartments are still falling.
That's right, and so the type of dwelling that people buy and go out and buy and are encouraged to buy, I would suggest and I would recommend that they be very, very cautious, and find out and if they are corralled in order to buy these. Developments into these developments, I'd really do all my homework in the background research on the builder, where they're built before, go look at what they built in the past, see if it withstood the test of time, and talk to the people that are living in those apartments to see, to find out who's managing them or how they're being managed, and have a look at not only what you see above the from road level upwards, but also what's in the basements and what's going on, which is the whole ugliness of the high-rise development industry, Martin, which is then leads us to this buyers being told to beware, with Sydney real estate agents selling units despite defect notices. How do you like them apples?
Yes, well, I'm afraid I've heard this a lot, and unfortunately, it's getting worse and worse, right? So basically, as the SMH made the point, was that they are effectively selling stuff when they shouldn't be selling stuff with the defect notices. And those defect notices, they're really significant, aren't they?
Look, they are, Martin. We're talking about the fact that these dwelling or these developments, they will not be given occupation certificate. No interim occupation certificate, no occupation certificate until such time that these defects are resolved and solved. Now, the reporter, talks to one of the developers, and the developer says, "Oh yeah, they're only minor things. It's only waterproofing, a bit of waterproofing here, a bit of waterproofing there, and a bit this and a bit that." Waterproofing. As soon as you talk about issues with waterproofing in high rise, run as fast as you can, because it's an ugly thing to try and rectify, and it takes years to rectify, especially when apartments are piled on top of one another, and it's just I've seen it. I've seen it being done. I've worked around it, and I've had relationships with developers that have had even 3-story walk-ups and small developments, 5-level, 6-level developments have issues, and it's a pain in the ass. And we're talking about high-rise development, 21 levels, 30 levels, 40 levels, and it's incredible how of course the developer's going to say, "Oh, it's an easy fix, nothing to see, nothing to worry about," but the agents were selling these and knowing. Look, you can't tell me, as much as the reporter says that the agents are saying, "Oh, look, we didn't know, we weren't aware." That's bullshit. You can't tell me that they weren't aware, that they didn't know. And then you've got the CEO of the REI New South Wales saying, "Oh, it's hard for agents to make themselves aware." Well, if it's hard, if he thinks that it's hard for agents not to make themselves aware of what's going on, they should be getting out of the industry. That's what McGibbon should be saying to the body. If you can't make yourself aware, if you can't educate yourself as to what you're selling, what the proposals are going to be, or who the developer is, and what the issues are whilst it's being developed, well, you shouldn't be selling them, and you shouldn't be in the industry in the first place. You don't deserve to be in the industry at all.
Absolutely. And of course, the Commissioner basically has told the agents off because they should be disclosing this to prospective buyers, and they're not. And as you say, it's either because they haven't done the work and don't know, which is ignorance, which is not allowed, or indeed they deliberately hide. And I suspect in some cases, Edwin, they're deliberately hiding these facts from prospective buyers.
Look, I can tell you, Martin, that 9 out of 10 times it's trying to turn a blind eye. Knowing what's going on, and that's what it is. I've been in this industry too long to call it any other way. Back in the day, we had to work out. We had to educate ourselves. If you wanted to sell, properties off the plan. We made it a point to educate ourselves and to find out what else was being built around the perimeter, or in the local area. If we were selling apartments and we were being told, and we got aerial photography as to certain levels having water views, particularly in the Central Coast when we did some off the plan stuff up there, and they had water views. We made it a point to find out who else was building nearby that could potentially obstruct those views, because back in the day we didn't want to get caught out, Martin. There was this fear and intrepidation about getting saying the wrong thing, but now it's a free for all. It's and the CEO of the REI New South Wales making excuses for these dinglings. It's shameful. It absolutely is. He should be putting out another message. If you don't want to be informed, if you want to get yourself informed and know what you're selling and what's going to be developed around the area, or do a bit of background history on the actual developer, and if it's a first time or if they've got dodgy developments from the past, get out of the industry. You don't deserve to be in the industry, and unfortunately, that's and yet these industry bodies want to run their own independent commission to regulate the industry, and pigs fly, Martin. Seriously, it's an ugly world.
I know. Self-regulation has not worked. Look at the financial services sector as another example of that. But the point you make though about you buy this apartment with a great view, and then you notice that just over the other side of the road there's another block. And then you actually look a bit harder and you think, hang on a moment, they could build on that block, it's zoned the same way, and suddenly that wonderful view disappears. Right? And of course, people are quite smart, because if they're going to do that, what they do is they sell the ones slightly further away first, right? Get people in them, and then build the next ones, and then build the next ones, right? So that effectively, I've noticed this on a number of different areas where effectively the views shrink away as they build more and more and more and more, right? And the phasing of construction is something that people need to be really, really conscious of. Plus the zoning. The zoning is really important. I always say to people, look at the zoning. Understand what can be built over the road, right? Because quite often people have no idea.
No, they don't. And look, unfortunately, this is where these real estate agents they target these individuals. And look, in the past, historically, the individuals that they've targeted are from overseas investors. Obviously, the new target are local investors that are wanting to make a quick buck, and but still ignorant of what they're really buying. And it usually comes from institutions that moonlight as real estate agents as well. You find that they've got accountants attached to their organisations. You've got financial planners, mortgage brokers. Look, you only have to dig deep enough into. You don't have to dig too far, I mean to say, to find out what the really MO is, and what the motivation is, which is really the high commissions and tell all types of bullshit in order to get it, because here today, gone tomorrow, and nobody gives a damn. And the poor bastards that are bought in these now have got stuck. The deposits are held back. They don't get what they thought they were going to get, and if they do settle, it's going to have ongoing issues. And do you really want that on top of the costs, on top of your ongoing costs and strata levies and everything else that are going to affect your future?
Well, I would, if I were thinking of buying, I would actually, in writing, write to the agent and pose them the question specifically, right? Are there any defect notices? Do you know of anything relating to building that could actually change the outlook, right? Get it in writing, and force them to respond in writing, right? And I'd hold that on file, because that's the only way that you've got any chance of getting the right answer.
Look, as you and I said for a long time, Martin, that it's critical that everything is on writing, whether it's through email, text message, and if you just had a verbal discussion, take notes because all that counts for any litigation in the future. So it's something that people have just got to be a little bit more proactive when you're going out and buying these ugly monstrosities that are being built. And I was disappointed with the article to an extent, because it only points out, or even the CEO of the REI, and they said, well, just make out like, and the industry at large, just make out the material fact is the asbestos insulation that was the cellulose fibre that had asbestos in it, and that's material fact, and they don't go beyond that. Whereas material fact, it's a much broader aspect. It has a lot more other issues or other topics, other things that are included in that, but they just make this thing out as to this the asbestos insulation, and they leave it at that, and that's all you have to disclose, which is nuts. That's not what material fact. It's not just that it encompasses. It encompasses a broader range of issues that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And my recollection, Edwin, is that the Commission has written to something like 50 sites and said, you've got issues that need to be addressed before you can actually sell these properties. Yeah,
and I think it was a few months back. I can't remember the article that I was reading. There's 16 or 17 actual sites that he's got on hold. So look, there's some action being taken. There's some you can see something happening, but again, we've got. The government should be focusing more on these bodies, should be empowering them a lot more, and should be creating greater infrastructure, as we've said in the past, Martin, that the regulators are so under-resourced. You can come up with these great ideas, but if you're not going to fund them, if you're not going to support them, well, how good are they? Everything looks great on paper, but you've got to get out there, and you've got to give them the power, and the resources to go out there and do something about it in order to protect the consumer, which is basically the general public. Not only from Martin, and I'll say this, not only from a position of and being an investor or buying into this as an owner-occupier, but also as an investor from a tenancy point of view, because the ongoing health issues that these things create, mold issues, bad mechanical ventilation, and so forth, and strata companies not passing on this information to the property management teams, just because your particular, or you could be in a building, you could be managing properties in a building where your ones are okay for the time, but there are issues in other parts of the building, but because you don't have access to all the information, the strata managers don't make it it's not, they don't make it a policy, or they don't make it a plan of action to include everybody, to let everybody know what's going on across the whole building in its entirety. So the whole industry needs to be looked at very carefully. It needs to be, the powers to be, the regulators have to come down a lot harder on the strata management teams, and the industry bodies such as the REI and the EAC. They have to become harder on their members to do the right thing, because they can ask for self-regulation, they can ask for all these things, but it'll be a shame if it goes that way. And I saw the CEO of the REI also pushing for saying, "Oh, we've still got a window of 2 weeks, and we should push harder to get greater empowerment in order to self-regulate the industry." If that happens, Martin, it's the end of anything that the government's been trying to put in place to curb the shenanigans that goes on in this industry.
No, I agree absolutely, and I could refer to the buy now, pay later industry as well, which is another example of a self-regulated industry, right? They've basically come up with this rather Mickey Mouse series of so-called standards because they want to avoid regulators actually breathing down their necks. Regulators have been looking at the UK, for example, and now that will be regulated. And yet in Australia, we seem to just accept that it's okay for the industry to look after their own interests first, never mind the end consumer. It's not acceptable.
No, it's not. And there are voices that aren't being heard. And I think, and I feel. Look, I feel for the people that are bought in these developments. I feel for the people that are about to buy with these BS incentives that the government's given, because they're just going to be paying more for the property than what it's worth, with greater potential of carnage or loss in the future, because they're buying things that are, smaller blocks of land, or as we mentioned, in apartments or subdivisions further afield in backfield areas that are being, again, there's not a lot of controls that are being put in place. So you've got ongoing issues with construction and building, and yet the government keeps on throwing money at this. So, but the other voice, I feel the greater voice that isn't being heard, or the greater mass of people, a voice that doesn't seem to get an ear, are the tenants. And it's an unfortunate thing that a lot of tenants are being squeezed out of good properties. And what choice do they have moving forward, Martin, other than occupy these dog boxes, other than have small families in high-rise developments where the little ones can't breathe properly because it's mold infested and it's got all sorts of issues, and they can't use the bathroom because it's got water leaks everywhere, and so on and so on. The governments have got a lot to answer for, in my opinion.
I agree. And interestingly, the last month, the rental stress rose significantly, and that's partly the end of the protections, the rental increases, the pushing of people out, and having to find another property. All those things are in play. So I think tenants absolutely have the damp end of the stick. And talking about damp ends of the stick, one of my followers that actually quite often sends me photographs that he sees when he's out and about, and he sent me a couple relating to the centre of Melbourne. And there are so many vacant shops and for lease shops in Melbourne. The CBD is pretty much dead. And there was an interesting article from Sky suggesting that perhaps 1/3 of Melbournians were now looking to exit.
Yeah, that's right. It was an interesting article, but as we've said, what's their option? I guess the option is, if you want to retire, and if you're in that retirement period and you just want to relax for the rest of your life, you go to Queensland. But if you got a small business, where do you go? I think this is what's going to put a lot of more pressure on freestanding homes in Sydney, when you've got this sort of stories coming about, and people decide to come north. And I feel that if you're a business owner and you're going to relocate your business, well, in my opinion, Sydney is the Sydney region, or New South Wales in general, is a great alternative, because there's not a lot, or maybe it's too far to move your business to Queensland. So I think that's going to put a bit of pressure on the property market in Sydney with regards to freestanding homes or dwellings that have got a bit of land that people can feel more comfortable, given all the uncertainty around the pandemics, ongoing new variants and so forth, that now we're getting global news on, that our WeChat chatters were telling us months ago what was going to happen and is happening. So it's a wait and see, Martin. Maybe we're going to start playing that aerial ping pong more often in Sydney as well.
Could well be, but it is interesting, and certainly some of my conversations on a one-on-one basis have been with people from Melbourne, seriously looking at Sydney, regional New South Wales, and areas of Queensland, and trying to make some tough calls as to, do I try and buy a property probably even more expensive than around Sydney, or do I look at Queensland where property is a lot cheaper? But then you've got to think about lifestyle and business opportunities. These are not simple decisions. And, sometimes the net conclusion is there's no such thing as the grass is greener on the other side of the fence.
No, it's a mess. It really is, and I feel as the weeks roll on, as the months roll on, it's just there's more uncertainty, and the government's losing control. And I mean, you and Tarek talk a lot about the economy and all the global uncertainties, and we've just had major issues in two of the biggest ports in China, and the further and ongoing delays that's going to cause with regards to materials, and goods coming into Australia and being shipped out to the rest of the world, but predominantly Australia because we're so reliant on imports. Base materials for construction, you name it, and we basically ship it in. We even ship in slabs of prefabricated slabs of concrete of all things in order to build. We do manufacture or assemble some here, but a lot of it's also imported because it's cheaper. So all these things are going to have ongoing issues with our economic outlook. But the pressure that a lot of the first home buyers are feeling and are coming in, and then the government giving them this so-called lifesaver isn't really a lifesaver. It's more of an anchor, in my opinion, especially if they are going to gravitate towards buying under-engineered and badly built high-rise developments.
And the other thing to think about, is crime. I did, and again, one-on-one, looking at a place called Salisbury, which is in the suburbs of Adelaide, right? And the prices there are, oh dear, what's happened?
They've had an ugly day, Martin. Dusty and Evan. They've been desexed, and they've see, she's having a hard time. They just got desexed today and microchipped.
Oh,
so they're having a bit of an ugly day. They need a little bit of love and care at the moment.
Oh dear, yes, not a good day. I always remember when I took one of my cats to get desexed, and the look he gave me as I handed him over, I should never forget. I felt so guilty. Sorry, I was saying. Salisbury, right? So I actually did some research on Salisbury, which is a relatively low-priced suburb. But one of the things there was was in the top 10 in terms of crime rates in the area, and it amazes me because quite often when I do my research, one of the data points I always get is crime rates. Right? It's really important because it makes a huge difference. Right? It makes a difference to the price, but also to insurance as well. And sometimes people forget about that until it's too late. And I think there's another example that you've got of the same thing.
Well, that's correct. Well, one of our followers, will go unnamed. One of our anonymous followers, sent in something with regards. Now, I don't know Melbourne, that well or at all. He sent in an interesting story with regards to, he was looking at some of the recent sales in Geelong, in Nor Lane and in Coria, and how properties are being bought and sold, sight unseen. And he made a comment via email to me with this, and how he was back in the day, he was a news reporter and that, or a cameraman, and would go out there and would cover a lot of the crime and that goes on apparently in these suburbs. Now, a lot of the properties are still being bought or currently being bought under sight unseen, and they're going off like hotcakes apparently. And so, but what is the point that he raised was exactly what you mentioned, Martin, and that is that he made the comment and said that these poor bastards that are buying there, whether it be for an investment or whether it be as owner-occupiers, the tenants or themselves are going to have a hard time getting content insurance because of the high crime rate. And again, this is what we were saying earlier on with regards to all these incentives given by the government and people just going in there willy-nilly and buying anything and everything around the place now, just because they think that they got free money, and they're making bad choices without really searching and researching whether or not their properties are going to be tenanted. Now I'll mention Katoomba. I've been doing a bit of work in the mountains, as you know, for some of our clients, and one of our clients wanted to buy a particular house on a particular street in Katoomba, and talking to the local agents, every time I spoke about that, listening to the local agents, they all just laughed. Eventually, one of them sat me down and said, the reason why it looks cheap and it all looks good and looks cheap for you or for your client, it's because that is the most frequented street in Katoomba by the police. So things like that make a big impact on future tenants, as well as future ongoing costs.
Well, here's a question for you then. Do you think high crime rates is a material fact that should be disclosed?
It is. It's actually what needs to be disclosed is, in terms of material fact, the legislation captures material fact by, if there was violence perpetrated in the property, and if it was a scene of a violent crime. So, in terms of, I guess that's where the grey area is what some agencies would determine as high crime. And they're the grey areas that aren't defined, but the legislation tries to capture as much as possible, and also particularly around sales with violence in a home, and look, I think a lot of that needs to be, how can I put it? It's in terms of violence, it's generally mainly around gang violence. Obviously, if you've had one of the things that I know a lot of agencies hide and don't disclose are the homes that have been busted for that were being used by people cultivating marijuana and having hydroponics in there. They clean them up and they're not disclosed, Martin, and I believe that they should be, but they're not, because they get around the loopholes in the legislation, because it wasn't a scene of violence or a death, So, but I think we need to include greater definitions or broader definitions of violence and crime in order to capture these things more into the legislation.
Well, certainly what I say to people is, if you're looking at a property, check the planning zoning to understand that, check the bushfire risks and the flooding risks, and check the crime maps or the crime statistics for the local area, because that will tell you a lot about whether the property you're looking at is actually fair value or whether it's not fair value. And so often people just don't, and then repent at their leisure. So it's important to check it all out, isn't it, Edwin?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, Mark, because when you talk about these subjects, one of had an interview with a couple, and they mentioned I mentioned to them, based on the price point, based on what they wanted to do, what they wanted to buy, what they were looking for, what all the inclusions that the ideal home or property would have, and we started looking at also travel distance into the city. And I suggested a suburb in the Blacktown LGA. My God, they said no, dear God, no, you can't. We don't want to go there. And I said, have you been there? I mean, based on the price point, it was one of what, and again, distance commute into the city. This was one of the better options that I thought. And they said no. There's we've been told by one of our friends that there's a high crime rate there, and I was a little bit baffled, and I said, well, then where would you like to live? I said, "Oh, we want to live closer to the city, blah blah blah," and they mentioned a few areas. And I said, "It's funny, the fact that the area that I suggested, one could say," and I said it sarcastically, and in my sense, with my sense of humour, I said the area that I suggested that I would think it would be an ideal choice for you is actually, you might say that that's where the criminals live, and the crime rate isn't as high as the area where you want to go and live, because that's where the criminals, they want to go and steal and rob from it, because they know that that's where people have got money. So if you really want to look at the stats, the areas where you want to live has a higher crime rate than the area where I suggested, for that reason, because and they sort of, I think I blew them away a bit. That some people don't get my humour, but yeah, what I mean, it's
absolutely.
Yeah, if you look, if price was going to be based on crime rate, Chatswood and Strathfield would be would be halved automatically.
No, absolutely. Now, Edwin, before we close, last Tuesday we were on the live stream, right? And we had that little competition going. We had 2 finalists, right? Now, both finalists are interstate. So my question to you is, are you in theory happy to have 2 people come and have lunch with you, or do you need me to whittle it down to 1?
No, look, I can do both. That's all good. That's all good.
Okay, all right.
I think one of them has already contacted me.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, that's good. That's good.
So I think he follows me on Twitter. I think he's contacted me, and jokingly he said, "Look, it's open. If you got 2, that's all good. That's all good."
All right. Well, I'll send you through the details, and we'll figure that out. And if I can't figure out who they are from the YouTube names, we'll find out how to actually make sure that they contact you. But anyway, so there you go. We had 2 finalists that got it right. Terrific, Edwin. Well, a very interesting conversation. Again, I think a very important set of themes tonight. And in the midst of ugliness, we have to try and find beauty, and beauty isn't sometimes where you think it's going to be.
No, look, it's one of those things, Martin, that I think the beautiful aspect of property and what we talk about as much as is in finding those hidden gems. And I know this may sound like a spill, but it's in looking for the hidden gems and looking for the hidden qualities in property. And if people learn to, if you go out there to as I keep on saying over and over again, look at buying property with an upside. It's the hidden gems that are being left behind or left by the wayside that often gets you into an area that you want to buy into, but you've just got to just look at it from a different angle, and that's a beautiful thing about property. The other great thing about property is that with a bit of thought, and if it's gonna be long term, a little bit of constructive thought and guidance from different professionals, whether it be architects, whether it be designers, decorators, you'd find that you don't need to do a lot in order to really make your property a great home for long term. And and some of these the older properties, all they need is as I say to some of our clients, all they need is a raincoat. Is a new skin, a bit of render, acrylic render or cement render, or a paint job or whatever on the facade, on the front, and it changes the appeal. And that's a beautiful thing about property here in Australia, is that you could make it look great with a little bit of thought. So it's not all bad out there. It's not all ugly, and some of those ugly ducklings can turn into some great swans.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. Edwin, thanks once again for your time tonight. Really appreciate it, and we'll do it all again next week.
Awesome. Sounds like a plan, Martin. And don't forget, send us those snaps of the signboards. We'll we'll judge them on. We'll do something next week.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Find the ugliest estate agent in Australia. That should be fun. Thanks, Edwin. See you soon.
Thank you, man.
Bye bye.